1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. First of all, let's talk about the two tracks in Voltas. When you're dancing the Volta, you have a back leg track and a front leg track. And you are going to keep the back leg in the back track all the time and the front leg in the front track all the time. So definitely the part that goes on 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The part that goes on is going to be in the back track. The part that goes on the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be in the front track. 1, 2, 3. Or I'll show you sideways. Back track. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. You may notice that if you don't do that, and you step beside the front leg, then you're going to actually end up circling. So this is sort of a natural thing. It's just important to understand that it has to be there. The next extremely important thing for me is what happens with the supporting leg, the leg on A. So, 1. First of all, it's going to be straight. Straight leg. It only bends on the next beat, which is 1. But on A, it's straight. Then, the most important part about that is your foot. And your foot has to be very strong. And I mentioned in the other video on feet, that to have a really strong foot, you want to have a really high ball of the foot always. So highest possible ball of the foot, whatever your highest is. It could be this high, it could be a little bit less high, everybody's different, but it has to be your highest possible. And this bone right here, the bone of the ball of the foot has to be pushing into the floor. So only a strong foot is going to be able to support your weight as you transfer your front foot from here to here. The next extremely important part is that this foot stays constant. So the way that you placed it, which is like this, it has to stay that way. The most common mistake that I see is my students, when they start to learn the Voltas, do this. 1. Did you see that movement of this back foot? It moves like this. That's a sort of a very natural thing to do. That's natural. That's why everyone does that when they first start to learn it. But you want to practice and make this something that's natural for you. Make it part of your muscle memory. That this foot doesn't turn at all. 1, 2, 3. It's going to be uncomfortable to do that for the first little while. The foot is definitely going to want to move, but you just have to flex it and keep it strong and not let it move at all. Make sure you place it also on the slight inside edge of the ball of the foot, so the foot isn't on the outside edge. It isn't square or just flat. It's on the inside edge. So when you place it on the inside edge, also do you see this nice churn out in the foot? So it's churned out a lot. I would say in Voltas you churn out your feet more than you do in other steps, like walks forward or back. So you churn out your foot quite a bit. And you keep it that way. Now the front leg, the one that steps on every 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. So your front leg is flat on 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, it's flat. And it's also turned out, a little bit more than it would be turned out if you were just walking forward, I would say. Just a little bit more. 1. And you end up in this nice Cuban cross action, which I've talked about in the lock steps. So a video on lock steps will tell you all the details about this. But I'll summarize it quickly. So about this far away from your standing foot. Yes, your supporting foot is about this far away. This foot stays constant, as I already said. So it didn't turn. The heel didn't drop. It stayed constant. As you placed it, it stayed. So the heel stays really high. Bone of the ball of the foot pushing into the floor. your feet are about that far away from each other, and this part is a 90-degree angle. And this foot is knees bent, this knee's bent a little more. One. So the way that this foot travels now, one. Make sure you travel it turned out. Natural thing would probably be something like this, but you have to force your feet or kind of flex them, keep them strong in that turn out. So, one. So all you have to do by the time we got here is just lower it. One. And always you want to control your feet. Control the lowering of your foot. You never want to drop it. One. Never that. There should always be a lot of control in your foot that you lower. So you shouldn't be able to hear your heels at all. One. Two. Center. One and two and three and. My students very often ask me about hip action in Voltas, and I would say there isn't very much hip action, but there's a lot of center work. So your stomach is constantly flexing. One and two and three. So this little part right here where you go onto your supporting foot, onto the foot that's in the back track, you bring the hip over that leg. So in a way that's a bit of the hip action. So you bring your hip over that leg and two and when you release your back foot, your hip travels a little bit more over this leg, but then as you go over this leg, the hip travels over this leg. So it's very, very subtle, the hip action here, I would say, or at least in the way that I do it. It's very subtle, but what's not subtle is this part. If you're doing Voltas and nothing is happening here, and it just stays flat, that's not really great. And one, and two, and three, and one, and two, and three. So notice at the very end, after you've placed your foot flat, after you have that beautiful Cuban cross position in your feet, right then, right after you do that, just before you release your supporting foot to go. One, and two, and so you can count it this way. One, and two, and three, and four, and one, and two, and three, and I think these are the important points in Voltas that you can practice for now.